In this series of 2 videos, I'll make a lidded box for my jeweller's ball vise. This style box goes by many names. I call it a neck box, but I've never really liked this name. Maybe you have a better name for it. I don't like razor box or cigar box either. There's many variations on how to make this style of box, most of the variation being about how to make it faster and with less materials. My focus is on strength and ease of construction, and my preferred method is to make it with 3 trays or open boxes. The size of the inside bottom tray is determined by what goes inside the box, and then the other 2 trays are made to fit the first tray. Even though the construction is with 3 trays, each of the trays is slightly different, and because of the height of this box, the lid tray has a bit extra to make it strong. The ball part of this vise is slightly wider than the base. This determines the size of the base tray, and while it's only slightly larger, I struggle a bit to work out exactly how much. The lid box is also slightly larger due to having to fit over the walls of the base, which will be made of 2.4mm grey board. I think the ball is 6mm wider than the base from side to side. I decide to play it safe and add 3mm to the diameter of the base ring, which with the thickness of the walls should give me an inside clearance around the ball of about 1mm. I'll only describe the highlights of making the trays. I have very detailed videos on making trays, including the different ways it can be done. There are links in the description to these videos. I'll use my favourite method of laminating some card to the base, which makes construction much easier and the box a bit stronger. 2 of the walls are the same length as the base, and I can cut them from the same piece of board I cut the base from. The other 2 walls are the width of the base plus 2 wall thicknesses. These trays are made a bit simpler by being square. I keep the grain directions of the walls parallel to the base or the opening. I line the inside faces with leftover paper from cutting end papers for books. I always match the grain directions in materials when I laminate them. I never cross the grain directions. Handmade paper is great for lining board as it usually stretches less in each direction, but I have this leftover Fabriano and I want to use it up. I forgot to mention the height is chosen so the base of the vise is slightly below the lip of the base tray. I intend to use the vise in the base of the box, so I don't want it getting in the way. I also wanted the neck part of the box to stick out about 20mm. After laminating materials, you'll see me putting pieces in the press. With the EVA I use, which tacks quickly, I can get away with leaving it in the press for a 10 count if I'm working fast. If you're just using the weight of a brick, I suggest waiting at least 10 minutes. Once I put a piece of oversized card on the outside of the base, I assemble the sides in the usual manner and use the Bookbinding corner magnets to hold the walls in place. I've become addicted to these things. In a more decorative box, I'd spend more time closing up all the seams and being very careful about glue squeeze out on any surface that doesn't get covered. For this practical box, I'm not so fussed about small gaps, as long as they're small. I don't want to be sloppy. This tray sits inside another tray, so the outside base doesn't need covering. Because it's narrow, I cover the full outside wall and turn in about 15 millimeters. Not having to go all the way to the base on the inside or turn over onto the base on the outside makes the covering super easy. The turning in over the walls into the inside of the tray is hard to explain in words. If you want to hear my attempt at describing this, check out the tray covering videos. Otherwise, for the people who have done this before, I show enough to remind you of the steps. The second tray is the one that the tray I just made sits in. The height of this tray determines the width of the neck part of the box. The goal is to make this tray so the inside tray fits inside it snugly. I normally add 0.5 mm to the size of the inside box, which normally results in an overly tight fit, and then I swear next time I'll add 1 mm. This time I decided to stick with the 0.5 mm, and I ended up with a fit that was too snug, and I broke the outside box trying to force them together. Then I decided to play it safe and added 1.5 mm, and the result was a fit that was too loose. At least a loose fit you can adjust, and I'll show you how I do this. The first tray sits inside this second tray, which means the board doesn't need to be lined with nice paper since it's never seen. The main difference with this tray is that the outside base needs to be covered, and thus the covering material needs to wrap around onto the base. To finish the base, a piece of material is glued over or under it in this case. For this box, I'm going to put a piece of cork under it, but I couldn't find the cork I wanted to use, and I had to order some, so I'll show that in part 2. Once I've got the second tray finished, I do a test fit and realise the inside box is too loose. To tighten the fit, I glue a couple of pieces of card to the inside of the walls of the outer tray. I thought 2 pieces was enough, but after I turned off the camera, I decided to add 2 more on the opposite side walls. Once I was happy with the fit, I just needed to glue the two trays together. I had the perfect weight to use while the glue cured, the ball vise. In part 2, I'll make the lid, which is unusually tall for a box, and this gives me an opportunity to show you how to make sure the walls of a tall box are sufficiently strong. To cover a lid, I normally use the single piece covering method, but I don't use it for this box, and I'll explain why the single piece technique wasn't the best option. I hope you enjoyed this video. Until next time, cheerio!